We have to be here in the rose garden before sunrise, so as not to lose the water inside the roses. Because when the sun rises, the roses wilt. When they wilt, they lose their moisture, and we need the water in the petals. This small rose isn't ready. We'll wait until it's fully open. But if I don't pick this, we'll lose it. It will wilt and fall off. So it has to be picked now.
Nice.
It smells good. Very fresh. Its smell is, how can I put it, soothing.
This March morning is the start of the Damask rose harvest for Saeed Al-Riyami and his family. There's no time to lose. The wonderfully perfumed petals must be distilled immediately after picking for the rose water to retain all of their fragrance. Saeed's hanging rose garden sits at the top of the Omani mountains. Known as Jebel Akhdar, Arabic for the Green Mountain, the region is named for the many oases that have sprung up in this arid setting. These surreal islands of green are home to many traditional villages scattered along the cliffs. On the southeastern coast of the Arabian Peninsula, the Sultanate of Oman is 80% desert. At 2,000 meters above sea level, the Jebel Akhdar massif extends for 100 kilometers at the center of Oman's main mountain range. Some 40 oasis villages are dotted among its rocky slopes. Gardens of Eden in the middle of the mountains of Arabia. Jebel Akhdar's steep mountains and dizzyingly deep canyons stretch as far as the eye can see. In these dry lands, people have achieved the impossible. Gardens of abundance cling to the rocky slopes. Water, so scarce in the region, flows in the bowels of the mountains. For centuries, ingenious farmers have harnessed this precious resource to cultivate the land. Today, passionate scientists are trying to understand the secret of the lush oasis' survival. The modern world has encroached on this once isolated region over the past few decades. Increasing urbanization is disrupting the traditional way of life here. But many villagers are striving to maintain the land shaped by their ancestors, determined to preserve their wealth of crops. The village of Al-Ayn rises to 2,000 meters. At dawn, after the first prayer of the day, the villagers make their way to the rose gardens bordering the mosque. Some have taken time off work for the annual spring harvest. Saeed Al-Riyami picks the delicate roses by hand, as his ancestors once did. Skills passed down from generation to generation, learned at a young age.
I started coming here with my father and brothers to pick the roses when I was 5. We live as a community, like the fingers of a hand. From daybreak, we all come here together. The whole family.
Rosa damascena is the Latin name of the damask rose. Considered the queen of roses, this variety from Syria is one of the oldest in the world. Those that bloom at the top of Jebel Akhdar are renowned throughout the Middle East for the supreme quality of their scent. These delicate flowers are harvested once a year. When the steep terraces come to life and don their robe of green at the start of spring.
Jebel Akhdar experiences a period of drought before turning into an earthly paradise. The color changes from dry to green. Then the green gives way to pink. The roses make it even more beautiful, because the rose always brings something positive. It gives people a sweet soul. When someone doesn't feel good, send them roses. After all, a rose is a rose.
The village's rose bushes grow alongside pomegranate, almond and peach trees, whose fruit is especially tasty. These species are usually found in the more temperate regions of the world. So how do these plants manage to thrive in this desert landscape? What is the secret of these gardens of scent and flavor? Andreas Burkert has been studying the oases of Oman for some 20 years. This German botanist has installed climate stations among the rose bushes.
In our small climate stations, which we use in conjunction with proper weather stations, we accurately measure the temperature of the air and its moisture content. The morning hours interest us most because this is when the temperature is lowest.
At 2,000 meters above sea level, the climate is milder here than in the rest of Oman. At the height of summer, the barometer never rises above 30 degrees Celsius in these mountains, yet it hits 50 degrees in the plains. But if fruit trees thrive here, it is above all due to Jebel Akhdar's winter temperatures. Each spring, Andreas Burkert notes down the measurements recorded by his instruments over the previous months.
The great variety of fruit trees, including those from temperate regions, is essentially due to the fact that we're at altitude, 2,000 meters above sea level, and that the temperatures are very cool for this latitude, especially in winter. If we look at this temperature data, we can see that it drops very sharply in winter to 2 degrees, and that it varies between 2 and 10 degrees. You never see these sorts of temperatures in the plains at this latitude. So this region has its own unique climate. And it is the accumulation of these cold periods which triggers a reaction to the cold and causes the trees to blossom and develop fruit.
Thanks to the microclimate at these high elevations, the villages of Al-Ayn are able to grow species typically seen in the Mediterranean basin. Lower down, the oases of Jebel Akhdar are home to more heat-resistant plants, such as date palms. But in the middle of this rocky landscape, these mosaics of crops could never have taken root without one vital element. Hundreds of channels thread through Jebel Akhdar's many oases. They are known as falaj. The Arabic word falaj means the place where water flows. For millennia, these networks of channels have been the lifeline of Oman's oasis villages. In Birkat al-Muz, the local children use the falaj as a swimming pool. This is one of the oldest channels still in use in the region. For 400 years, it has snaked along the streets before irrigating the crops below.
This falaj flows through the neighborhood, in the middle of the old village. This is my grandfather's home, and my other grandfather's house was over there. We always walked along the falaj. We'd swim, wash, and perform our ablutions here.
Kamis al-Dugaishi is the village wakil. In other words, the custodian of the water.
The wakil has many roles and responsibilities. Each falaj has a wakil. He oversees water distribution, services, the general upkeep of the falaj, and collects fees. We're going to open the channel for this plot. Its owner is allowed an hour's worth of irrigation. Each person has a specific number of water time shares. Some people have 30 minutes, others 10 minutes, or 2 hours. It all depends on the size of the plot and the amount of crops that need irrigating.
The daily life of Birkit al-Muz's farmers is dictated by the opening of the falaj. Kamis makes sure that each farmer respects his allocated irrigation time.
Oman's irrigation system is its greatest resource.
Like generations of wakils before him, he looks after this precious water.
This water is as valuable as the blood flowing through my veins. I am happy and proud to be responsible for this water, for this falaj, for this ancestral heritage. The previous wakil passed it on to me in a good state of repair, and I want to pass it on to future generations in the best possible state.
In this desert landscape, water is a precious and rare commodity. So to conserve this resource, Jebel Akhdar's oasis farmers have cleverly organized their plantations on several levels.
Typical of the Omani oases is this multi-layered system of agriculture. At the top, you have date palms, which benefit from direct sunlight. Then there are bananas, or citrus fruits, or mangoes, which are there. And right at the bottom, you have fodder crops.
The advantage of this multi-layered system is that the crops growing at the lower levels are protected from direct sunlight. At the top of the date palms, temperatures can exceed 45 degrees Celsius, whereas at ground level, they never exceed 30 degrees. But that isn't all. These milder temperatures help keep evaporation to a minimum and maintain adequate moisture in the oasis.
The oases have a unique microclimate. The air moisture level is much higher. The relative humidity of the air is 20 to 25%, whereas the humidity recorded in the oasis in the morning ranges between 80 and 100%. This is essentially due to the cooling effect.
Thanks to the Omani farmers' know-how, the oases of Jebel Akhdar have survived for centuries, despite the hostile environment.
These oases have stood the test of time. They were sustainable before we even thought about what sustainability meant, because it was necessary to survive in this climate with these environmental constraints, namely high temperatures and limited water availability.
In the heart of one of the world's most arid regions, vegetation has managed to thrive, lulled by the sweet melody of the water flowing in the falaj. For centuries, people have had to use their ingenuity to harness this rare resource. But where does this coveted water supply come from? On the surface, the mountains are dry and barren. It only rains a few days each year. But the bowels of this Omani mountain range contain millennia-old treasure. Between 30,000 and 6,000 years before our era, the climate of Oman was slightly more humid than today. Rain poured down the mountain slopes and seeped into the ground until it reached a layer of impermeable rock. It is these water reservoirs, known as aquifers, which the people of Jebel Akhdar have exploited for centuries. Over 2,000 years ago, the mountain dwellers managed to tap this precious resource to cultivate the land. Guided by the thin strips of vegetation clinging to the rock, they located the few spots where water comes to the surface. The high-altitude oases are thus irrigated thanks to this resurgence of groundwater. And the region's natural reservoirs are recharged by seasonal rainfall. But at the foot of the mountains, as in Birket al-Muz, farmers had to find other solutions to transport water over longer distances.
This falaj is a complex engineering one. This is a tunnel dug inside the soil for several kilometers. Some Aflaj even, the tunnel is up to 17 kilometers. And also they are tributaries. I mean, you have the main tunnel, then you have sub-tunnels assisting the main tunnel. And these systems tap the water without any external energy, so just mainly by gravity.
After locating the groundwater reservoirs, people dug tunnels beneath the mountains. Thanks to a gentle slope, they were able to convey the water from the aquifers to the low-altitude oases several kilometers away. In Birket al-Muz, water quality and availability are closely monitored. Abdullah Al-Ghafri heads up Nizwa University's Aflaj research unit. He and his team record the state and flow of these channels all over Oman.
It's important to measure the flow rate because we can assess how much water is available and how much water is getting less by time. Usually this falaj is never dried up, usually so far, and I hope it's continue like that. The Aflaj is not important as a water system or as agriculture system. It is part of our heritage, it's part of our culture, it's part of our history. In fact, for me, it's identity. It's our identity, in fact.
In this drought-prone region, water management has been critical for people's survival for millennia. "100 kilometers south of Jebel Akhdar, this vast plain is home to an ancient oasis settlement. On the edge of the desert, archaeologists have discovered the remains of a citadel, as well as those of a dozen mysterious towers built 5,000 years ago.
We're standing in the middle of a tower dating from 3,000 years before our era. Like the other towers of that time, it was built with large stone blocks. And as you can see around us, it is 2.5 meters thick, and it is about 35 meters in diameter.
Ahmed Al-Tamaimi is the archaeologist in charge of this site. 5 years after a French team first excavated here, the exact function of this monumental tower remains a mystery to scientists. But next to the foundations, the teams found traces suggesting that the structure was probably connected with water management.
We are now next to the tower's outer wall. In this area, the excavation revealed the existence of 2 ditches around the tower.
The tower was once surrounded by 2 ditches full of water. This land was already arid 5,000 years ago, but it enjoyed a slightly wetter climate. The plain was periodically flooded during the rainy season. People may have diverted water from nearby streams to fill these circular channels. Clues found in the ground provide precious information as to what this water was used for.
The dig team also found seeds and grains of wheat on the site. This indicates there was organized farming in this area, which was the region's economic backbone. Water management and exploitation go hand in hand with the construction of these structures.
Drawn to the site and its providential seasonal waters, nomadic people settled here to farm the land. Thanks to their water management skills, they created the very first oases in the Oman Peninsula. When the climate became more arid, the oasis' inhabitants probably had no choice but to move closer to the underground water reservoirs. So they scaled the mountain heights and began to build these cliff-edge terraces. Today, these hanging gardens are home to a wide variety of crops. The species that take root here tell us volumes about the region's history. In ancient times, Oman became known for its trade in copper and frankincense. Like Sinbad, the mythical hero of 1001 Nights, the country's sailors crossed the 7 seas. These seafarers brought back many varieties of plants from their voyages. Then, over the centuries, they scattered them about the country's oases.
If you take a close look at the oases, you realize what a treasure for humanity they are. You can see plant species that are rarely found together like this elsewhere. But above all, the oases contain varieties that are rarely seen or even no longer exist anywhere else.
With his Omani colleagues from Sultan Qaboos University, Andreas Burkert frequently scours the country's remotest regions. Their aim is to identify and analyze the different species cultivated in the mountain oases. "300 kilometers south of Jebel Akhdar, in the small village of Kbir, the botanist has discovered unique crops. Often introduced several millennia ago, these species have been preserved by the farmers on the remote terraces.
We have found a unique variety of banana, which has caught global attention because it possesses a special defense mechanism against diseases. Thanks to secondary molecules, it protects itself very effectively from insects as well as from fungal attack.
As well as these particularly robust bananas, the botanists have identified plant varieties in the mountain oases which do not exist anywhere else. These ancient crops, a legacy of Oman's distant past, have retained favourable agronomic traits.
Often, the material brought to the oases centuries ago has thrived, and it has not gone extinct as it has elsewhere. It has not been altered. In fact, there are still plant varieties here that we'll be able to use in future for crops, for instance, to aim for certain qualities, such as drought resistance and disease resistance.
While plantations on the plains are dominated by a limited range of modern crops, the oases of Jebel Akhdar contain a rich biodiversity. Crops to feed humans, as well as cereals and fodder crops for livestock. The residents of the small village of Marbit have always been dependent on livestock rearing. Traditionally, the men work in the fields and the women take care of the animals. Every morning, Al-Zalfa al-Subi helps her goats suckle their young. Some mothers need a bit of help to feed their offspring. So the herder makes sure every kid eats its fill. After suckling, she takes the adults to graze in the mountains. The agile animals climb the steep mountain slopes, where scrubby vegetation has taken hold. These scrubs and bushes are enough to sustain them for much of the year.
This bush here is swed. It's all dry now, but when it's green, it's very good for the goats. We call this the arbeb. This plant produces fruit that we sell at the market. The animals eat them with or without the flowers. It's good for their organism and their muscles. And it smells nice too.
The goats spend the morning looking for tender leaves. Then they make their way home to the pen.
We make sure they're all home. But none is missing or has got lost. If that were the case, I would miss them terribly. I'm very fond of them all. This one is called Akfuf. And that's Izalo. He's sad because his mother doesn't suckle him. And her name is Ilwa. It means gentle, pretty.
At the end of March, when spring arrives, the mountain vegetation does not provide enough nutrition for the goats. So Al-Zalfa supplements their diet. Every day, the goats get a ration of sardines and nourishing dates. While the kids and the weakest adults feast on fresh fodder, picked by Al-Zalfa's brothers in the nearby oases.
They give us dates, as do other people from the outside and our close friends. They give us things, we give them things. We trade with them. We exchange produce or livestock, and they give us money, vegetables and other items.
In Jebel Akhdar, farmers and breeders have cooperated since time immemorial. But meat and fodder are not the only things they trade. Another, more unusual commodity is also prized. Mohammed Al-Rawahi is an ecologist. For several years now, he has been studying the Oasis soil with Andreas Burkert.
So you can see they have here goats and sheep's manure.
Yes.
But in the other field, they have also cows.
Cow manure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which, depending on where the resource is from.
Exactly.
Whether they get it from the Jabali
or from here.
From here.
You can see from the soil how it's fertile, from even the color, and you can see the amount of the manure that they applied here in this village especially. They applied a lot of manure, and that will increase, you know, the organic carbon in the soil. But the carbon, especially the carbon, is important for this, the macrofauna, like the worm and also the microorganisms, so they can do their job for mineralize the organic matter so the plants can uptake it.
Nothing goes to waste in Jebel Akhdar. From neighbouring farms, nutrient-rich manure is used as natural fertiliser in the plantations.
People here are more doing agriculture, and people up in the mountains, they are more herders. They have more goats and sheep. They bring them the foods, and the others bring the meat and also the manure. Because of this trade-off, and this is close loop between these two groups, these oases were survived and sustained all the harsh conditions.
In this remote desert region, the trading between farmers and herders has meant the oases have always had healthy and fertile soil. These wonderful gardens attract many insects. And the falaj tunnels provide shelter to reptiles and amphibians. All of this wildlife has taken advantage of these man-made ecosystems. But it is not alone. The oasis terraces are also home to many wildflowers. For 25 years, Annette Patzelt and her colleagues have roamed the Omani mountain range, identifying the plant life growing around the oasis gardens. Jebel Akhdar has one of the biggest varieties of wildflowers in Oman. Opportunistic species that have taken hold in the oases.
As well as the cultivated plants, there's also an incredible amount of wild herbs, especially in the herbaceous strata under the cultivated trees and shrubs. It's humid, there's shade, and more water. In the desert, it wouldn't be possible. You don't find these plants here. But here, in this man-made environment, it's a bit like an island in the desert.
So, let's check the walls and see what we can find.
During their field studies, the scientists have identified many wild species in the gardens and in the cracks in the walls supporting the terraces.
There are almost 100 species, so a great variety of plants. And it's because for centuries no pesticides or other chemical products were used. Quite the reverse was true. These terraces were cultivated in a very ordinary, very traditional way. And here at altitude, we find a fair amount of plants, such as this grey field speedwell. It has pretty blue flowers, but it's a bit late in the year for flowers. You can already see the fruit. And this plant is only found here, in northern Oman, in these oases.
Saif Al-Atmi and Abdurrahman Ali Nai work for the Oman Botanic Gardens. These ethnobotanists have identified some 30 medicinal plants used by the locals to treat stomachache, fever and skin conditions. Some of these plants are also used to treat animals.
This plant here, it is belongs to the Solanaceae family. It's called the Toramittel, that's the scientific name. And the common name is devil's trump. So devil's trump, it's related to the shape of the flowers. Why is devil's? Because it causes hallucination. So the plant is used for treating animals. Like for instance, if people, they saw their animals like they are refusing to eat and they losing weight. So they're using the fruit when it's ripe. That's improving their appetite and it starts to eat more.
So the oases cure people and animals as well as nourishing them. These rich ecosystems are evidence of the skills of Jebel Akhdar's farmers. But this traditional form of agriculture is under threat. In the 1980s, the country embarked on a path of modernization, spearheaded by the new ruler, Sultan Qaboos. With oil and gas revenue, the Sultan built roads, hospitals and schools all over Oman. Once isolated, the oasis villages of Jebel Akhdar have also undergone a significant transformation. In the space of just 20 years, the new town of Saïq sprang up on the high plateau, a few hundred meters from the terraced rose gardens. The residents of the most remote villages have gradually moved to these modern neighborhoods with running water. It is certainly a more comfortable way of life, but it requires more water.
The water consumption increased from this area and that led to more stress on the groundwater. And if we could really make more water use efficient there and reduce the consumption there and divert that water to this oasis, that will keep this oasis live here and more sustainable for the future.
With increasing demand from the town, there is less water for farming. As well as the growing stress on water resources, this wave of urbanization has other consequences. The most isolated villages are abandoned and their terraces neglected. Most villagers now work for the government or private companies. But some continue to tend their land, as it provides a significant source of income. This is true of Musaba Al-Awami, who works at the regional hospital. Although it is a 2-hour trek to his old village, he often goes to the family plot. Whenever he can, he takes his son Muntir. The walk is a special moment. They are a family of few words, but Musaba makes the most of each break to teach his son traditional songs.
وافتقدت ناس عز الرجال وافتقدت ناس عز الرجال كمن فرقت الأحبة نسأل المولى بجنات النعيم نسأل المولى بجنات.
In the middle of this barren landscape, the oasis finally appears around a bend in the canyon. For generations, Musaba's family has farmed this fertile land, where date palms thrive. The terraces are also home to other fruit trees, vegetables and cereals.
Carry on along the bottom. I'm going this way. Go that way. All right?
When he gets to the plot, Musaba starts by opening the falaj. Muntia knows exactly what to do. Like his brothers before him, he does just as his father has taught him.
They have to learn the techniques, how their father plants, irrigates, and harvests. How to take care of each tree. How to look after the date palms, the lemon trees, and the mango trees. They will pass on these skills. I hope with all my heart that they will not give up when I'm gone.
Musaba hopes his children will continue to care for this remote oasis. For these terraces represent much more than a supplementary source of income.
This land is so precious, absolutely priceless. Because our ancestors worked hard to cultivate it. None of this existed before. So it is our duty to care for this land.
While some inhabitants strive to care for their family plots, others are making the most of a promising new opportunity. The oases and villages of Jebel Akhdar are attracting more and more tourists each year. Aware of the treasure bequeathed by their ancestors, the Omanis are taking ownership of the future of their villages. West of Jebel Akhdar, the old houses of Misfat al-Ibrahim nestle in the middle of a lush oasis. The villagers have never stopped farming the land. But some chose to leave their traditional homes for more modern houses on the outskirts. However, in the past 10 years, this old village has got a new lease of life. Yaqub al-Abri's uncle was the first to turn his family home into a guest house.
I spent my childhood in this house. I've been here for over 25 years, so all my memories are still present. This beautiful place that people from all over the world come to visit is a wonderful nature site.
For several generations, Yaqub's family has cared for the land around the house. In the shade of the craggy gardens, the Omanis enjoy the relaxed lifestyle they are known for.
The experience of the traditional Omani way of life, that's what we believe in. We don't sell the sort of luxury things you find in hotels. We want tourists to experience the authentic Omani way of life with us. They sleep on the floor and eat Omani dishes cooked by local families.
Just like Misfat Al-Ayn, some villages in Jebel Akhdar are gradually coming back to life thanks to tourism. Respectful of local heritage, these initiatives have nothing in common with the luxury resorts that have sprung up recently in the region.
Our presence here as Omani residents of the village inspires us to take care of it and make it sustainable. As we've managed to maintain agriculture, we now have to preserve the old houses and enhance them in one way or another. The village, our customs, the place, our irrigation system. It's a source of great pride for me. This village and the Omani traditions are kept alive here.
The pride Yaqub feels for his village is shared by many of Jebel Akhdar's farmers. These men and women continue to work tirelessly on the terraces built by their ancestors. It is now mid-April, and the rose harvest is coming to an end.
Okay.
Saeed's nephew is distilling the last petals of the season. Although gas has replaced charcoal, the distilling is still done the traditional way. The petals are heated for over 2 hours in order to extract the rose water. The precious elixir of the mountains will soon adorn shelves across the country. And in a few months' time, at the end of summer, the terrace's bountiful fruits will be ready for harvest. Like the peaceful village of Al-Ayn, the lives of many of these mountain dwellers are still governed by the seasons and harvests. But for how much longer? Jebel Akhdar is now at a crossroads. Between modernity and tradition, the future of this region largely depends on the choices its inhabitants make. More than ever aware of the treasure they have inherited, many want to preserve their villages and the bountiful terraces around them. Profoundly attached to their roots, they are mindful that these gardens enabled their ancestors to survive in an extreme environment. Thanks to the ingenuity of man, these oases have bloomed in one of the world's most arid regions and survived through the centuries. In an era of climate change, the traditional knowledge of Jebel Akhdar's farmers could inspire a return to more sustainable farming practices.